Hello and welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Carrie Oderman with UATV. On October 14th, Ukraine marks Defenders Day. This is a day honoring the courage and heroism of defenders of the independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Ukraine. The holiday was established in 2014 by a presidential decree following the events that took place in Donbas. To talk more about the importance of this day, we welcome to our studio retired Major General Volodymyr Havrylov, former Defence Attache of Ukraine to the U.S., Great Britain, and Romania. Hello, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello.
This is an important day, but it's a relatively new holiday in Ukraine. I'd like to ask you what it means to you as someone that served many years in the Ukrainian military.
Yes, it's a very important and emotional day for Ukrainian military. Ukrainian military just inherited many cultural and maybe historical things from the Soviet era, and we still remember the change of the command in 1991, then the Ukraine became independent, and once again we started to talk about the modern military in Ukraine. But the real emotional part of the Ukrainian military history started in 2014. When we were engaged in protecting, defending our country against foreign aggression. And we started to lose our people. And our blood is in our mind. Our wounded comrades are in our mind from 2014. So today we will see on the streets of our cities and towns in Ukraine many veterans, veterans with experience of war, on our territory, not somewhere in Afghanistan or somewhere in peacekeeping force in Africa, but in Ukraine, with family involved, relatives involved. So for us it's very emotional and really Military Defenders Day.
So 2014 was really a touchstone in the history of the post-independence Ukrainian military. What changed for the military after 2014 to make them face the challenges of the Russian aggression?
In 2014, Ukrainian military was very weak. Weak because of the lack of the political leadership, lack of understanding on the high-level governance in Ukraine, on the importance of military. So we started with very weak army, with underemployed personnel, and then with lack of modern armament. And it took maybe 1-2 years before we can consolidate our efforts and our resources and to start to create our modern military.
Now,
we are still on the way. We have a lot to do. A lot been done last 3, 4, 5 years. But at the same time, it's still a long process ahead of us.
Defenders Day also recognizes the efforts of volunteers. Especially in 2014, there were many volunteers in the Donbas. How were these volunteers later incorporated into the Ukrainian military?
And yes, the history, the story of volunteers is very important for Ukraine. In 2014, we didn't have a military force on the east side of Ukraine because we never expected that kind of direction to be dangerous. So the first people, the first paramilitary who really faced the challenge were volunteers. They came from different parts of Ukraine, many of them sometimes with military experience, but they were quite motivated and they were really ready to suffer to stop aggression. They were very important in 2014, 2015, and then the military became more stronger and more, let it be said, ready to defend the country. Those volunteer battalions been incorporated to our armed forces, to National Guard. And now they're part of our military. We don't have volunteer battalions now, but we still have many guys who started as volunteers, but they are now in our military as professionals.
Now, you had mentioned that when the Ukrainian military formed itself in 1991, they were separating themselves from their Soviet legacy. Historically, many Soviet military personnel had been stationed in Ukraine, and after Ukraine became independent, they were given the option of joining the Ukrainian military or going back to Russia. Did this affect the military's organization at all? Were there positives and negatives to this?
Yeah, in 2091, the huge replacement or movement of people started in the Soviet military. There was an agreement between Russia and Ukraine that allow officers, first of all, to come back to the original countries. And many Ukrainians from Far East or Central Asia, they moved to Ukraine. We inherited a huge number of people at the time. More than 800,000 people was on our territory. It's a huge force. And the Ukrainian economy was not ready to just digest that number of people. And but nevertheless, step by step, we succeeded just to reduce our military to more or less affordable numbers. And most important, we just give our people the opportunity to serve to their own country, to their own people on their territory.
The question's always asked about the future of Ukraine in regards to membership in NATO. Right now, with the the Turkish incursion into Syria, some of NATO's own allies aren't in agreement with what Turkey is doing. Is NATO still the way forward, in your opinion, for Ukraine's military?
Ukraine is a huge country comparing with other countries in Europe, especially in Central and Eastern Europe. We have the territory like France. We're bigger than Great Britain and Germany. We have a population which is the biggest in the Central Europe. And we have also experience in defense industry and defense operations. We have an army which has a combat experience in modern warfare on our territory. So in terms of military, we could be a very good contributor to the European security as a member of NATO. Of course, we have to do our job. We have to do our homework to reform our military and to be comfortable, and we have to introduce NATO standards in our military. But Ukraine, in terms of capability, future capability, in terms of the motivation and the size, could be a key player in the defense and security sector of Europe and a region, especially in the Black Sea region. Having the problem with Turkey, of course, in NATO there are discussions about what to do in case of Turkey decides to be more or less independent and not to be a key player of NATO in this flank. And Ukraine could be the great replacement. Of course, we are looking for Turkey to be with us because Turkey is our partner in terms of our territorial integrity, and they supported us in our reaction towards annexation of Crimea. And for us, it's more comfortable to have a Turkey as a partner in Black Sea region. But nevertheless, Ukraine has to do its own job, to make its own, to do its own way of reform, to be a strong member of NATO, not a country which is looking for protection, but the country which is ready to contribute to the common defense and to make NATO stronger, to make European Union stronger.
That brings us to an interesting topic that we can hopefully expand on. Let's talk about these reforms and maybe the role of the new administration. A preliminary budget's just been released. Is it enough money for Ukraine to do the job?
It's not enough money.
Is it ever?
Given the problems we have a lot to do with our equipment, with training, with people. It requires a lot of money, a lot of resources, which country doesn't have now. In this situation, of course, we are looking for any support from other countries, but we have to rely, first of all, on our own resources and to be more efficient in spending the resources we have. And there are still a lot of discussions in Ukraine what the best way to approach the reform in our military, because we can do it in a more classic way, just having the numbers of 250, 60,000 people and trying to keep them equipped, trained, and with necessary social package. At the same time, we have to be realistic. We can't win an operation or the war with countries like Russia if we are going to use classic methods and practices. We have to find our model of protecting the country with resources available. It means we have to introduce more asymmetric and hybrid practices in operations. And that's the role of the General Staff in that. They have to think about scenarios and how to use in the right way people we have, resources we have, maybe not to have 2,000, 60,000 people less, and to use the rest of the resources for equipment, for training, or some kind of hybrid or asymmetric ways of operations. And that's the area we have to concentrate our focus on. We have to be realistic in this world. Nobody, other countries except Ukrainians themselves, is ready to lose their blood to protect our country. It's our job, and we have to be ready for the worst scenario. If we are one-on-one in person with foreign aggression like Russia, and we have to be prepared. We have not to be scared of that. If we are not scared, Russia is scared. That's the best way of Ukraine to approach its military reform.
Well, thank you very much for joining us on Defenders Day. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
That was retired Major General Volodymyr Havrylov, former Defence Attache of Ukraine in the US, Great Britain and Romania. Thank you for watching us, and stay tuned for the rest.